in which men and masculinity are being marginalized. Manly virtues are now laughed at. Worse, they're considered dysfunctional. Men are being edged out of the family, the workplace, and wider society. The game of life is increasingly being played by women's rules. Success and failure measured by women's criteria.
In a stable, relatively law-abiding 21st century society, man is not needed as a protector. In a welfare state in which most women work, he's not needed as a breadwinner. And with sperm banks, IVF and same-sex marriages, what's the point of him? Will there come a time when he isn't needed at all? Man is becoming redundant, an optional extra, rather like metallic paint on a car or grated chocolate on your cappuccino.
I think we've got ourselves into a situation in this society where we are telling men it's not okay for you to be a man. Everything to do with manhood we despise. The strength, the aggression, the drive for leadership. And of course all these things are things that actually make a nation. Without them, a society goes down the pan.
I think men are now the underclass. We love what's masculine about men, but we won't let them be masculine. And I think it's very difficult for them to find something that they can be praised for. And what they're praised for now is basically taking on the role of female, which isn't their strong point.
All around me I see people trying to feminize society, to reverse the roles of men and women, to run masculinity out of town altogether. What was, I think, a genuine campaign for equality between the sexes has turned into a gender vendetta. The whole male sex is being demonized. The pendulum has swung too far in women's favor. It's time to redress the balance. A lot's changed since the 60s. Back then, a generation of angry young females turned their backs on housewifery and marched off to be a different kind of woman.
You keep saying you got something for me.
Or perhaps, come to think of it, a different kind of man. There were casualties of this victory for female emancipation, some women, but mostly men.
Equal rights and liberation.
I think the demonization of men has come from what I would call extreme gender feminism. That's not the kind of feminism which says that men and women should be regarded as equal in the sense of having equal opportunities and women being treated with respect and so forth. It's the kind of feminism which took over in the late 60s, early 70s, which basically said that men were intrinsically violent, that men were all rapists, as the phrase went at the time. And I'm afraid that's rather stuck.
Outsmarted and outstripped by women at every turn, men are in crisis. You only need a quick look at the statistics. Sperm counts are falling by 2.6% a year. The male suicide rate has risen by 70% in the last decade. 93% of convicted acts of violence are carried out by men. 65% of divorces are initiated by women. By the age of 80, there are nearly twice as many women alive as there are men.
Historically, male physical strength, competitiveness, aggression have made men dominant, physically and mentally, for good or for evil.
I am the greatest.
It was men who made all their heavy industry, the wars, the scientific advances, the cultural triumphs, building, protecting from other men, inventing, creating, destroying. It was all very messy, but it was male qualities that have driven humanity to its present preeminence, inventing almost everything that matters, creating all the art that is sublime, and, of course, making most of the misery in the world.
3, 2, 1, fire!
The Second World War sent women into the workplace. As men went off to fight, thousands of women took on their jobs in factories and on farms.
Down on the farm, the land girls are doing their bit and a bit more. And you should see their calves.
After the war came a great revolution in housework. Machines made cooking, cleaning and washing so much easier. Overnight, in historical terms, they were free for other things. Technology not only liberated women, it wiped out men's traditional advantage. Male strength was redundant. Female skills like multitasking were suddenly more important. The result, men's status is in disastrous decline as blue-collar jobs disappear, and with it their role as the breadwinner.
I think one thing that women don't understand is that they can be defined by many different things. It can be their job, being a wife, being a mother hugely defines people. A man really only has his career.
You rarely see a woman committing suicide over an issue at work. Unemployment for a man or redundancy is something he will kill himself over because he has lost his sense of self. And although women love work and they're very good at it, they, on the whole, and I do think it's biological, spread themselves far wider. They want a more well-balanced life. They are not willing to put up with divorces and heart bypasses just to get a job promotion.
Since 1973, 90% of all new jobs have gone to women. Men are not only being displaced from the lower-level jobs, they're losing ground everywhere. It's been slower at the top, but more and more women are smashing through the so-called glass ceiling. Rachel Elno is founder of Red Letter Day, a company that sells once-in-a-lifetime luxury experiences. I wanted her opinion on how far feminization has infiltrated big business. Do you think business is a male-dominated arena still?
Yes, very much so. And I think it's probably one of the last bastions of the male control. And all of the kind of powerhouses of control are still hugely male-dominated. I think they're clinging on as hard as they can, to keep that power. Women who are getting to the top of those organisations have done it through almost being very masculine or alpha female at the very minimum.
Do you think men in business are perhaps even more defensive because of what's going on in society at large?
Well, the men that I meet in business, particularly the ones who are at the top, have still got all those male traits, accentuated to the nth degree. And I think those things do get larger than life when you get very successful men in a very male world.
Might that be why they're successful?
Yes, but if you've invented the rules, then, you invent the rules that you want to play by. And despite everything that's happened, the rules are still very much male ones, male created, and therefore they have much more chance of winning.
But business isn't a playground. Business isn't a social services. Business is competitive.
Yes.
By its very nature. And therefore, it's not just that men make the rules, it's just that those particular qualities happen to lead to success in business.
Yeah. But I suppose it depends how you measure success, because...
Well, it's easy to measure success in business, isn't it? It's how much money you make.
Well, that's...
For you and your shareholders.
But that's a very male measure.
No, it is the measure of business. A business isn't around just to be nice to its employees or to its customers. It is there to actually produce a result at the end of the day. Your business as much as anybody else.
Yes, but if you look at it on a wider scale and in terms of the market and the way that it's changing, something like 80% of consumer decisions now are made or influenced by women. So even things like car purchases and financial products and house purchases, which traditionally have been considered as very male consumer areas, are now very much influenced by women.
So what you're saying, that even though, men's last stand is business, that actually their days are numbered. Because if the consumer decisions are being made by women, then that ultimately is going to fashion business as well, in women's image.
Absolutely. I think it's the businesses that wake up to the fact that they need to have that female voice, not just at middle management level, but at the top level. Those are the ones that have more chance of succeeding.
Do you think men feel threatened by women these days?
I think men's power base is being eroded, that's for sure. So I think the changes are for the good. So, yes, it's long overdue.
So it seems it's only a matter of time before the feminization of the workplace is complete and the dominant male boss of old is in every sense redundant. What does society make of those who hold what you might call unreconstructed views on men and women's roles? Are there still men who dare to adhere to a more traditional way of life? I managed to unearth one of these rare breeds in Cambridgeshire. The countryside campaigner and farmer Robin Page married recently for the first time at 61. He believes in a division of duties many would find archaic, indeed outrageous.
Would you regard yourself as an old-fashioned kind of male by present-day standards?
I think I am a traditional male in outlook and physical construction.
and self-sufficient?
Virtually, yes.
But you did get married recently?
I did get married, and
why was that then?
A beautiful wife. Well, a friend of mine said, Robin, why are you getting married at your age? So I said, well, you want something warm in bed at this time of life. So he said, why don't you get a good terrier? And so I said, well, I haven't yet found a terrier that can use a hoover.
Well, that doesn't sound as if you've got the relationship right from the start.
Well, we've got a very good relationship because she has got small feet, so she can get really close to the sink. And so that is also good.
How do you expect your wife to behave?
Anita behaves very lovingly, very beautifully, and she knows that I'm busy earning a living. She doesn't go out to work, and if she wanted to get a job, I would be happy for that as well, as long as she didn't expect me to cook and sweep, because she knows what I'm like. I don't want it. I wouldn't expect her to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning when we start lambing to check the lambs. And similarly, I would hope that if she sees a bit of dust on the sideboard, she wouldn't expect me to dust it. Please tell them not to write.
It'd be pointless, would it?
Yes.
So what do you say when women of a feminist disposition come up to you and regard you as something prehistoric? And not to mention appalling.
I really enjoy it. Yeah, I did a talk the other day when people stormed out. Political correctness is the new sort of McCarthyism. I remember going to the BBC and opening a door for a woman, and she just stalked past and didn't say thank you. And so I do think political correctness in London, it's an entertainment. There is this huge political pressure on you to be a new man.
Where does this pressure come from?
Deep. I believe from the politicians. I think it is a yes, I do.
You think Tony Blair is feminising society?
Oh dear. Well, you've only got to look at him, and yes is the answer.
But it could be you're just a chauvinistic old croak.
Could be. Could be. Only time will tell whether I'm right or they're wrong.
What does it all add up to? Well, there are lots of exceptions, of course, lots of qualifications, but basically, men have lost their roles, and women, for the first time in history, are on top. And there's nowhere where men have been more obviously marginalised than in the family.
I think this feminisation of Britain has taken a number of different forms. Probably the most important, I would say, is the restructuring of the family around the idea that fathers are a kind of optional extra. They've become, if I can boil it down in this way, no more than sperm donors, walking wallets, and occasional au pairs.
More than a quarter of births in the UK are now outside marriage, and many women consider single motherhood a perfectly acceptable lifestyle choice. But I think this growing trend for women using men just to have a baby and then discarding them is dangerous. I think children need two parents, a male reference point, as well as a female one. I would, of course. I'm a man. Laura Baker Graves is a life coach and single mother. She has 3 sons by 3 different fathers.
Laura, was being a single parent choice or circumstance?
Oh, choice. Absolutely. I was, how old was I? 32, 33? Although I'd never been broody in my 20s, I'd always said I wasn't going to have kids, actually. I then started to think that having kids was something I really wanted to do. I wasn't willing to miss out on it.
So you've got 3 children?
Yes.
By different fathers.
Yes.
None of whom are around, at least on a permanent basis now.
That's right.
They are at best walk-on parts in your family lives.
Yes.
Does it work?
Yes. It works
Seriously,
really...
does it work, or are you just making the best of it?
No, it works really, really well. I had a lot to offer a child. It might sound arrogant, but I thought I would make a blooming good parent. I mean, I had a fantastic childhood. My parents and I are still really, really close. So I felt I had a very good role model. I would say that I'm intelligent and articulate and, quite sort of go out there and do it.
But you talk about having a good childhood, maybe even an ideal childhood, with two parents. I mean, you didn't have any reservations about, because, you would take your risk of being...
Two parents, but...
You didn't think it was essential for your child?
No, I didn't think so.
What did your family make?
Oh, well, after a bit of initial shock, they were very supportive. As I said, my parents are outstanding, and they're very good at letting me make my own mistakes.
What do your children make of it?
I don't think it strikes them as unusual, actually. I have an awful lot of women friends who are single parents, and so that's something the kids perceive as the norm in a way.
I mean, the really fascinating thing about this is here you are with three children by different fathers, none of them are around, which to people of, anyway, my parents' generation, maybe even of my generation, would regard as how can I put this, unconventional, perhaps even disgraceful. And here you are, a life coach. Do you think this is the kind of lifestyle that should be encouraged?
Oh, maybe encourage is too strong a word, but I think anything can be made to work because everything's changed so incredibly.
But wouldn't you prefer to be in a single, long-lasting relationship with a man who was father to all three?
No, I don't think so. Seriously.
Families, it's generally agreed, are more complicated than ever before. Long gone are the days of breadwinner dad, housewife mum, and 2.4 children. Today, websites market sperm for women who want the child but not the husband, while men are driven to dress up as Batman and Spider-Man to demand father's rights.
I think that the effect on the children of fathers becoming detached from family life has been absolutely disastrous. Generally speaking, the children of fragmented families where there is no committed father sticking around do worse in every single area of life. It's a built-in disadvantage. And we have built in now to our society this built-in disadvantage because we have told ourselves it's no big deal. It's preferable for a father to stay around, but basically women can do it alone.
Already, large numbers of council estates in impoverished areas are effectively matriarchies. Both men and women are unemployed, but the women do still have a role. They can be mothers, and increasingly they'd rather do that by themselves. The men are reduced to fleeting fertilization duties, then dismissed.
Having been told that they are an optional extra in the family setup, they carry that out, and they say, okay, in that case, I won't be around. The result is that everyone's the loser.
These young men have no meaningful role, either in the factory or the home. Many react by taking refuge in drink, drugs, crime and loutish behaviour, in a rather pathetic attempt to reassert what they believe it is to be masculine.
Go out, squat a car, have a bit of fun in it. Go in the back field, fly around here. Something to do. And set it on fire when they finish with it.
If this continues, one of the greatest dangers of 21st century life will be the rogue, redundant male. In this feminized society, men who act like women are clearly preferred to men who act like men. We live in touchy-feely times, And public figures like Princess Di, like Tony Blair, have promoted the idea of embracing, of caring, sharing, emoting, effectively stigmatizing traditional masculinity.
You know, in my lifetime, I've actually seen things that we valued from men be devalued. Toughness, strength, tolerance, the ability to not talk about something, the ability to let things be.
The values associated with men have been said to be wrong, illegitimate, or undesirable. Values such as stoicism, the old stiff upper lip, keeping your emotions bottled up. We're told on the contrary, everything has to be out in the open, nothing must be repressed, we must wear our hearts on our sleeves and our tears on our cheeks.
I remember an interesting report which was issued by the relationship organization Relate, where they actually confessed that although women said they wanted their men to become more emotional and get in touch with their emotions and share their vulnerability, when the men did actually do this, the women didn't fancy them anymore. And I thought, what a ghastly betrayal. You lured men into recreational weeping only to say, we don't fancy you anymore, we've lost respect for you, please be a bastard again. Terrible.
Britain's now got a cappuccino culture, and just as the simple, straightforward English cup of tea has been discarded in favour of continental frothiness, so the stiff upper lip of the traditional Englishman now looks completely outdated compared with freshly moisturised new man. Even the landscape around us is being feminised. Women have bars aimed at them, cars aimed at them. There are now decent pub lunches rather than curled-up sandwiches. All these things show that the growing economic power of women is ushering in an era dominated by females and feminine values. One male response has been reactionary, to dive headfirst into lad culture. Many younger men take refuge in beer, birds and football, much to the disgust of women. But is the fashion for laddism and loutishness a desperate cry for help from a drowning gender? I wanted to know what the 30-something male feels about men's current situation, so I met up with the journalist Piers Hernu. Piers, you write for Lads magazine. Yeah. Would you regard yourself as a lad?
Very much so, I think. Writing for men's magazines, you have to be in touch with men, and I've always regarded myself as a man's man, if you like. I have certain values that I hold dear. I like the company of men, and I like generally how men behave.
Do you think the idea of the lad, the new lad, is in some way a response to what's going on in society?
Yes, I think certainly it's a reasserting of sort of male values with the advent of Loaded magazine and bands like Oasis, kind of reintroducing a bit of a swagger back into the male psyche.
The serious point here is if society is being feminized, what's happened to the middle ground for men of, sort of stiff upper lip, reticent, decent, middle ground men?
It doesn't leave a lot of room for manoeuvre because you're sort of vilified if you reject the new touchy-feely, let's talk about our feelings, but we never did talk about our feelings. It was always the male way to internalise them and let them be dealt with that way. There's nothing wrong with the stiff upper lip. There's nothing wrong with not wanting to talk about something or to, go into some big group hug or to discuss my childhood or something like that. It's like that. It just doesn't work, and I'm not going to be forced into it.
What do you think are the special qualities that men have and women don't?
We're more competitive, we're more aggressive, we're more rational, we're more logical, we're more interested in how things work. We want to take things apart and analyse them. Women don't know how a light bulb works. They don't want to know. It's not their business. If they're not interested, they're not interested. They don't know about mechanics and cars and things like that.
And you think those male virtues are important or vital or what?
I think they're absolutely crucial. Without that, I can't see society moving forward one step, really.
So a truly feminized society, in your view, would be disaster, would it?
Yes, I think it would be like an aeroplane with one wing, much bigger than the other. It just wouldn't fly, or it would fly straight into the ground, and there'd be a great deal of trauma. In many ways, we're slaves to our own lechery. and that's our fault. But women know that, and they can make us jump through fiery hoops to get what we supposedly want. And that goes on an awful lot, and it's rather humiliating, I can tell you. Well, I'm sure you know.
Well, not in this century.
But even the new lads like Piers have their feminine side. 1 in 3 men under 40 now use moisturiser every day. Last year, British men spent £65 million on skincare products. They also shelled out £920 million on personal hygiene and £88 million on fragrances. Androgyny is the prevailing fashion. Men are having facials while women are buying cars.
What's really interesting about where feminism has taken culture is that women now have what they want. And typically, something's missing. What women want was total fairness, total equality. They wanted what men had. But they also wanted the classical man, whom they've destroyed.
In place of the classical man, we now have the metrosexual man, preening, girly and fashion-conscious. Men's magazines reflect this growing trend. They're full of fashion advice and advertisements for moisturisers. GQ magazine is one of the best-selling men's fashion magazines aimed at the sophisticated man about town. To give me a profile of today's modern man, I went to meet its editor, Dylan Jones.
Looking at your magazine, looking out of the window of your fashionable offices into the fashionable London square outside, there seems to be a trend towards the androgynous, mannish women and girly boys. Do you think there's anything in that argument?
I do, actually, and I think that the metrosexual man was very much a media construct. But I think pretty much it's true. It's a real demographic, and I think that men in the city, working in particular industries, are probably more effeminate. And I think a lot of it's got to do with the way they consume. And actually, men are far less sophisticated consumers than women are. And almost we've been, in our industry, we've been going through a process in the last 30 years of educating men to consume as women. And the big growth area now is in cosmetics and grooming, moisturizers and what have you.
How would you describe metrosexual man?
A metrosexual man is a heterosexual man who has adopted various feminine traits. But as I said, it's mainly about shopping.
What's driving it?
I think that in the society we're in at the moment is that men make their marks in different ways, and it's no longer just about the job you do, where you are in society. A lot of it's got to do with how you look, your behaviour, your attitudes, and I think that men need to define themselves in different ways, and I think that one way they are doing that is by consumption. It's still tied in with status, but it's a different kind of status.
Where does all this leave traditional male virtues?
I think traditional male virtues are kind of floundering as traditional men are. You know, as the safety net of society was pulled away in the 80s, lots of men didn't know what to do. That's why a huge rise in violent crime and drugs, you know, they don't know what they're meant to do anymore. Also, women have been encouraged to act like men. I mean, on a Friday night, you'll see women behaving in as a disreputable fashion as men once did, and still do. I mean, that whole notion of female rag culture and the kind of loutish behaviour, I think, is almost being encouraged. In broad brushstrokes, women in society have much greater profile, more economic firepower, and you know, they're taking over.
In towns across the UK, it's now commonplace to see packs of ladettes drinking pints, mooning, fighting, throwing up. In fact, behaving as badly, or even worse, than their male counterparts, the lager lad.
This bucket represents what you drank last night. Just feel the weight of that. This is reconstituted what you drank.
That's terrible. That's ridiculous.
This abrupt reversal of roles even extends to the mating game. It seems to be increasingly the norm that men are now the prey and women are the hunters.
Women are much more predatory now, and they're predatory because they're sick of waiting for men to come and ask them out. In romance, someone must pursue, and to be pursued, you have to run away. And unfortunately, a lot of women don't. A lot of women turn around and charge right back in. I mean, men are actually frightened by women being predators now, and you can't blame them. I mean, as a woman, I'm frightened.
One of the problems of modern feminism is that its understanding of equality has been not what the early feminists would have understood to be equality at all. And as a result, I'm afraid women have increasingly taken on the more louche characteristics of the caricature male behavior.
So while girls acquire masculine qualities, men are being told if you don't cry and whine and hand out your feelings to anyone who'll stop and listen, there's something wrong with you. We live in an age that demands emotional access. I think television and the rest of the media are driving this feminization.
I think maybe you do need a little bit more cleavage.
Look at the way we have so many lifestyle programs aimed at female audiences at the expense of current affairs and documentaries. And at how men are continually portrayed in adverts, drama and sitcoms as ineffectual, clueless, idiotic.
Look, I'm calling a meeting at 4 this afternoon, a sort of brainstorming.
What, on a Saturday?
Yes, get your ass in here. I want to get cracking straight away.
Martin Freeman's character Ed in the BBC series The Robinsons epitomises the downtrodden modern man. In virtually every scene, we see him completely at the mercy of sassy, stronger women.
Charlotte Little?
No.
God, you really like living on the edge, don't you?
Ed, I had a meeting with Nigel.
You are going to love this.
I'm going to have to let you go.
Huh?
The feminization of the media is definitely reflected in our interest in opinion pieces rather than hard facts, in celebrity rather than something that actually has some substance. And I think we are suffering intellectually because of that.
Newspapers, too, have become preoccupied with opinion and lifestyle at the expense of reporting. Emotion takes precedence over rationality.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Heroes are a useful barometer of society. There used to be soldiers, Battle of Britain pilots, polar explorers, lions of empire. Now it's David Beckham. Wet, if not downright androgynous.
I'm running out of hairstyles, I think, but no, this one's just to keep my hair out of my eyes, so.
The stars of today are more androgynous because they need to relate to both men and women. We want someone, you know, like Colin Farrell, perhaps, you know. He's slender, he can play bisexual roles, but he's a bit of a lad, so he really satisfies both camps. He's not particularly old school masculine, though. He's not responsible, he's not married, and he doesn't care. So maybe that's the only role that masculinity has these days that we accept.
Where does this leave the old-fashioned alpha male? The protector, the provider, the decision-maker. Is there still a place for him? Countess Alexandra Tolstoy met her husband Shamil, an Uzbekistani Cossack, on a horse-trekking expedition along the Silk Road to China. Shamil was the guide and led the group for thousands of miles over 8 months. They fell in love and married in 2003.
What attracted you to your husband in the first place?
Well, for me, I suppose I'd never analysed, you know, what British men or European men are like, but for me, Shamil was just completely different from everything I'd encountered before, in that, he's what a stereotypical man should be, I think. He's very masculine, he's very capable, he's very confident, and he, will always control the situation. And I think it makes for a much better marriage, because we play very separate roles in our marriage. There's no conflict over who does what.
Well, these are traditional male virtues,
Yeah.
aren't they? Are these in short supply? Do you find many men like that in this country?
Well, when he came to England, everybody said to me, wow, he's a real man. And I also, for me, it was very attractive that he's very connected to nature. And I think actually in England, the connection, one of the big reasons why this mass aging happened is the urbanisation of England, that so many people are based in cities, which is essentially a very unmasculine environment, isn't it? You're not connected with the outdoors, and those are traditionally very masculine virtues.
What do you find unattractive about them, or...?
I think one of the things I find most unattractive, which is what you see in all male idols today, is vanity. I just think it's so unattractive and unmasculine. They wear more designer clothes than women, so I just find that extraordinary. Completely perverted masculinity.
What about sort of old-fashioned male courtesies, gallantry, opening doors, and all that kind of stuff? I think they've died out of it.
Yeah, well, actually, no, Shamil's very good about that.
Oh, Shamil is, but of course he is the masculine man.
Yeah, I think it's very sad, and yet...
Endangered species.
But I think lots of women are very greedy. They want everything. They want to be equal, and yet they still want to be feminine, and they still want to be looked after, and yeah, I think it's unfair.
Where does this leave other traditional male virtues, like reticence, like stoicism, like competition and aggression, I suppose? Where does it leave all that?
Well, I think it's very difficult because men have been forced to subdue these very instinctive, natural emotions. I mean, it's very difficult to predict what will happen in 100 years. I cannot believe that it's normal to remove one completely natural instincts in a man. I can't believe that it would be good for society, good for the family, good for business, good for the economy, good for everything. I think we shouldn't meddle with nature.
You think that's what we're doing?
Yeah, definitely.
Since the beginning of time, the male of the species has always been the stronger of the sexes. But now even Mother Nature is in conspiracy against us. With sharply falling sperm counts and rapid advances in IVF and genetic engineering, men could be in danger of becoming completely obsolete.
I think everybody should be worried about men. I really do. If women really understood how men felt, they would act differently.
It's not very clear to me whether this trend towards feminization of society will just continue careering along in the way that it is. In my view, it is so socially disadvantageous, it amounts to a kind of social suicide, if you like.
And I think that right now, men are in a terrible position of not knowing where they stand. And I think women are at fault, because women are not giving a man a place to stand.
And I think there's already some signs that women, especially younger generation of girls, are thinking that they don't wish to negate the progress that women have made. They don't wish to go back to the kitchen. They don't wish to have jobs and so on. They wish to be the equals of men in the public sphere. But nevertheless, I think there is a feeling that, things have gone too far.
Girls know that the world is going their way. Boys can sense it, even if they don't know why it's happening or what it's going to mean for them. For all of human history, it's been a man's world. Well, here and now, it isn't. Men are going to have to be less like men and more like women, and even that may not be enough. Our fate may be that of male bees, drones in the hive, tolerated if we're lucky, but marginalized, despised, good for only one thing and then disposed of. And even that isn't essential. Maybe we're going to need that stiff upper lip after all.
Men are quite right to feel marginalized at the moment.
Well, I think it was a very incoherent program. I mean, it started off with this strange word, democracy, which is a kind of horrible hybrid of Greek and Latin. I think what he meant is gynocracy. But in fact, we haven't got that either, and I don't think any of us would want that. And I don't think you could just as easily make a program which says that Tesco's taken over the world, as, it would be as coherent as this program. What he did was use statistics very selectively, use things like the fact that women live longer. Well, they always have. Historically, if women survive childbirth, and they tend to live longer than men, that's not new. Manufacturing industry has declined, men's jobs have declined, but that's a feature of late 20th century capitalism.
Isn't that an evolutionary process, that there are, by virtue of the fact that we don't build ships anymore, we don't do a lot of heavy engineering, that it's changed. But that is an evolution rather than any kind of imposition.
And I think grey matter has replaced industrial matter, and I think it's fantastic. I think it's great
that women are becoming equal to men, and in some areas dangerously so, becoming more equal. And the question is...
But why dangerously so?
Because I think that there is an issue here. I think there's an issue is, you know, are we talking about equality, which is what feminism was originally about, or are we talking about superiority? Are we talking about being under Jones' stiletto heel, for example, or are we talking about walking side by side as equal, as partners, and respecting the differences between the genders?
But we talk about statistics in the programme, but there's lots of other statistics as well. You know, that only 2% of women are on the board of companies that are in the FTSE 100 that actually look at the judiciary, look in fact at, you know, at Parliament. In a sense, there's a long way to go to tip that balance.
Well, I think there's discrimination in two areas. I think discrimination against men and fathers in the home, and still discrimination against women in the workplace. And I think the intelligent debate that needs to be had needs to identify where the prejudices and discriminations in society exist. And if we can have that, and if we can accept that and have an intelligent debate, then that's got to be to the benefit of both genders.
Joe?
Well, I think what this tells you is two things, basically. One is that people who are privileged don't actually recognise how privileged they are. It's only the people who are below actually look up and see that someone like Michael Buerk is tremendously privileged. And also that there's always a kind of appetite for misogyny, because it seems to me this programme was a kind of very emotional gut response of a man of a certain age, ignoring lots and lots of evidence. For example, if women are running the world, how is it that in rape trials, there's less than 1 in 20 rapes reported to the police. It now results in a conviction. There's virtually no punishment for rape in this country anymore. How is it that only 16 years ago, when John Major became Prime Minister, his first cabinet had no women in it at all?
But Joan's falling into the same mistake. She's failing to accept that there is misandry and there's misogyny. And I think the intelligent debate with intelligent feminists would actually support what I'm saying.
Both of you, thank you very much.